Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Paradigm Shift, the podcast in which I challenge your thoughts and beliefs in topics such as spirituality, philosophy, ancient history, conspiracy theories, and everything in between. And in today's episode, we will be talking about the 4 pillars of reality. So let's go ahead and do the intro. Now, when we talk about the 4 pillars of reality, we cannot separate them from the 4 dimensions. In my previous episode, I spoke about the 5th dimensional world, and today we're going to go back a step and talk about these 4 pillars. And in a way, we will not be discussing it from a scientific point of view about what time is and what are the 4 dimensions or what's in the 4th dimensional world and all that. We will talk about how these 4 pillars, which come from the 4 dimensions, actually shape our reality in every aspect. And I'm gonna go over them by discussing how they basically shape our 3D world and how they affect us from on an individual level, an example of how it affects us on a planetary level, and go bigger on a universe level. And then we're gonna go back into the individual. So this is going to feel like a giant inhale and exhale breath, like when it goes out and goes back in. This is how the 4 pillars of reality shape us in the 3-dimensional world. And to name what they are, these 4 pillars, I'm gonna talk what each one is, and then I'm gonna explain how they affect us on our level. So the first pillar of reality is the pillar of expression. Expression is when you, as someone or any being, knows what you are on the inside and you want to express yourself on the outside. So this is the expression pillar. The second pillar is the experimentation. So after that I know who I am on the inside, now I am going to live through the world that is outside of me based on whatever it is that I am inside, and I will learn from that experience. I will just experiment and grow through experience. So the first one is expression, the second one is experimentation, the third one is integration. Basically, this is when we start going back in. I know who I am. I expressed myself to the outside world. I experimented and experienced the outside world. Now I'm going back into myself, taking all that knowledge within me so that I can get the full experience that I have just been through. But in a way, I want to put it all together and understand it. And the 4th pillar is transcendence. And that is when I have achieved integration, I have understood what my experience was, I experimented every sort of experience that I have found, and now that I am free from that knowledge, I can take it. After giving it to someone else, I no longer need it, so I go to experience another type of reality. So it's expression, experimentation, integration, and transcendence. And these 4 pillars are visible in everyday life. So everything that is around us is formed under these 4 pillars. And I'm going to give you an example of how it will affect us, how it affects me as a being who was born on this planet, how it affects a plant, for example, that is giving me that, how it affects the planet as a whole, and how it affects the whole universe. So Me as an individual, in the first stage of expression, I am born. I am born into this world. So I was one entity, and I knew what I was on the inside. So now I am expressing myself. It's the expression of the self. This is when I am born into this world. This is stage 1. Stage 2 is when I am growing within this world, and I am learning this world, what it has to offer me. And that is usually done through our early years of life, when we are getting to know what the world around us is. We are growing into this world. We are learning, experiencing, experimenting, understanding what is good, what is bad, what will help us survive, what won't help us survive, relationships, everything that we are learning. And this is usually our, maybe if you want, teenage years, our adolescence, our early 20s, stuff like that. And then comes the third phase, the integration. And that's where you, as a human being who has expressed itself, who has learned how to go about, that's when you take all that knowledge and you apply it in your day life. And you usually apply it to yourself, and you apply it to others. If you have a child, you will teach him what you have learned. If you have someone you care about, you will teach them how to do things. If you have a project you want to start, you pour in all your experience into it. If you have anything that has taught you, that basically you take what you have learned from that experimentation that you went through, and you apply it into your daily life. And then once you have learned what that is, once you have achieved integration, you basically die. That's it. Transcendence. You finish from this world. You have achieved a purpose. You have grown enough and experienced everything that you are supposed to learn from this lifetime. And that's when usually you end up done and transcending into the next life, in whatever shape of reality that has to offer. And that, of course, differs from one culture to another, one religion to another, one spiritual belief to another. But some people believe you go to heaven. Others believe you reincarnate into the world because you have more to learn. Some believe you ascend to a higher dimension. Whatever you want to call it, basically, the only truth that exists is that we all eventually die. We all finish our purpose on the planet, and then we move on to another thing. Now, this is how these 4 stages, or these 4 pillars, affect our day-to-day life. And notice how that we in the 3D world are bound by these laws, are bound by these 4 pillars that shape us. And it not only affects us as human, but it also affects everything around us. So the same thing as with ourselves, if you look at a plant or a big tree, a tree starts as a seed, and that is the expression of itself. It is expressing itself when it is a seed. And then the seed starts to grow and grow over time. This growth is the process of learning. This is the process of experimenting life and experiencing what life has to offer, how to survive within the soil, how to survive within the weather, within the sun, within the rain, everything that is giving it, until it reaches a certain maturity level. And we call that the integration, where the tree is now ready to give back whatever it learned. It gives back the fruit to whoever needs it. And once that happens, a tree will eventually die. It will transcend this 3D world to whatever reality will come after it. This process is not only on sentient beings, it's also on a very large scale, which we call the planet. The planet itself does also go through 4 pillars of reality. Through every year, there's a cycle that we go through every single year, and that is spring, summer, fall, and winter. And in the spring is when the planet expresses itself into new life, new fruits, new greenery everywhere. And then in the summer is when it is experimenting, it is when it's growing. Then the autumn comes, and that when it gives back, it integrates and gives back. And then the winter is basically death, not in a very negative way or pessimistic way. And then the cycle starts all over again. So this aspect of reality that governs us is not only applied to our planet or to any being that is actually going through something or experimenting something. We can even see it as us as conscious beings. So us as conscious beings, we are going through these 4 pillars of reality, and some say that we are now in the 3rd stage and in the 3rd pillar, which is integration. And if you want to apply it to our consciousness as a human race, we were first expressed into this planet. We came into being. We were born, created, whatever you want to call it, on earth. That was the form of expression. And then for the last 10,000 years maybe, we have experimented, we have experienced life on the planet, we have learned what it has to give us, but we also have focused on something very important, which is survival. So we were learning how to survive on the planet, how to make with harsh weather conditions, with floods, with volcanoes, with wild animals, harsh life conditions. That was our experience. That was our experimentation on the planet. In today's world, we now understand as a species that we are going to die. There is no other truth other than death. So we no longer focus so much on the survival mechanism. We have put this system in place, these systems that govern us, that we have created when it comes to having a job, when it comes to working, money, social conditions, marriage, everything that we know that will help us survive. However, we are also beginning to understand that we are not brought on this planet just to survive and to eventually die. We are beginning to understand that we need to start living on the planet. We have experienced and experimented with the planet, and now we start to understand, we start to look at life in a very different light than we used to 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, or more or less. It's this great awakening that I once spoke about in a very early episode, how we are now shifting into a new level of consciousness, into a higher one, because we are going through this integration process where we know that it's not just about surviving anymore. It's not about the physical survival of my body. I also need to survive on a mental level, on a soul level, and that is what is called living. When we are no longer worried about our survival, but we are now focused on a different type of survival, quote unquote, which is the life itself, what life has to give us, what we can achieve in this life. And then one day, hopefully not too far from now, we will also be transcending this planet itself and this 3-dimensional world as a collective consciousness, not as one person who's dying, or 2 or 3, or people who have mastered certain things while still being in the 3rd dimension. I'm talking about the entire transcendence of the human consciousness above the 3-dimensional world and above this reality that we are part of, so that we can finally reach the 4th level, the 4th pillar of reality, transcendence. And we can let go of this, whatever we have learned, whatever we are bound by, all our 3D life and rules that we have, and we can go into a higher self. Now, when it comes to the universe itself is also going through these 4 pillars. So even in different aspects of what we think is reality, the universe itself, the consciousness of the universe, is going through that. Now, this is a very big topic. And the God consciousness, or the consciousness of the universe, is something that needs its own episode or 2 or 3, and maybe even more, because that topic never actually finishes. And I will talk about it in later times. I will talk in details about what that consciousness really could mean and how it manifests itself into our reality. But for now, we can also find the universe, if we want to call the universe as a collective consciousness, as one consciousness, as the one itself, the self itself. This consciousness has gone through the 4 pillars of reality, or is going through the 4 pillars of reality. It has, as the one, if you want to call God, or what you want to call the creator, or the source, the consciousness, the only truth, whatever you want to call it, in whatever language, whatever religion they call it. That consciousness itself has first expressed itself into the universe. And this is what in science we physically call the Big Bang. It's the expression, the self-expression of the self. I keep saying that, the self. The expression of the self is the first pillar, is that explosion, is that form of the reality that we are in, the universe that we know. God has expressed itself. And now we are in the experimentation phase. We are going through, as a collective consciousness of the universe, of everything that exists in the universe, not just human beings, not just planets, not just animals, every form of consciousness that we know about and we don't know about. And there are so many things that we don't know about, so many forms of intelligence and of consciousness, of beings that we are not even aware of, and we will never be aware of, because we have so much limitations, from social conditioning to our reality defining senses, to everything that holds us within this 3-dimensional world. The consciousness of the universe is experimenting with us, and it is going through this self-understanding of what creation is, of what it could be, how far can it be as a creation. This existence that we are all part of, this is part of this experience. And if you look at it from a human point of view, imagine that they say that there's around 110 billion people who have ever lived on this planet. Okay, so now we have around 7.5. Throughout history, everyone who was alive and who was dead, we are in a rough number of 110 billion. Imagine 110 billion number. This number is unfathomable if we actually think about it. How many lives have existed so far on the planet, and not a single one of them has experienced the same thing as someone else. Imagine how beautiful that is. Imagine how beautiful that the God consciousness is experiencing every single possibility there is to experience. Everything. Anything you can imagine and still not even imagine yet, it is experiencing it. Every form of reality, every emotion there is, everything up and down, high and low. We are talking about love and hate and anger and experience of joy and everything that you could experience. This is part of it. This is this experimentation phase that we are all now taking part of. It's this consciousness that has created the whole universe, experiencing what the universe is, what life is, what love is. It's experimenting what creation itself is. And then at some point we will understand all of it, and we will go into this integration phase where we put it all together, where we understand that this was this. And when we look at the world within the 4th dimension, which is outside of time, or through time actually, we no longer just see the experience itself, we see what this experience has taught us, what this past, present and future of everyone's life, what it was about, how we can gather all that information and put it together and look at it and understand this. So it was this, and it was that, and it was that, and every piece of information, every piece of expression, of feeling, of emotion will be all put together, which is what we are going through right now, before we reach that transcendence phase, which is the fourth transcendence, which is so far off. But at the same time, it's not part of time. So we are not talking about something that is happening right now, and then at some point it will stop happening, and then something else will happen. Unlike the four pillars, which are within the 3D world, because we are bound by time, we are limited by time, that we cannot perceive it the way a fourth dimensional being can. So we look at these four stages of reality in our 3D world, and we only see them through time. So first it was this, then it was that, then it was this, and then it was that. These are the four ones. However, when we talk about the consciousness of the universe, consciousness of God, and how it is expressing, experimenting, integrating, and then transcending, it's all happening at the same time, because there is no time. I wish there were more words that we can actually use so that we can get over these barriers that humanity has when it comes to explaining certain ideas, but sadly there isn't. And once we understand and we make it part of our life that whatever we're going through is simply an experimentation that the consciousness is going through, this affects us on a personal level in ways that you cannot imagine. And this is when I was saying that we're gonna go back into the small self after we have experienced how these four stages affect us personally, affect the planet, affect the universe, and then we're going back. The breath is going in now. And once we are able to understand that everything that we go through, not just yourself as one person in this life, what everyone goes through all the time, all these experiences, all these emotions that we go through, that this is part of a learning process. This is the second pillar. This is the experimentation. This is us understanding what everything that existence has to offer. We no longer associate failures and negativity with a being that is sitting up there on his crown, under his crown, on his throne, somewhere in heaven, and judging us, making things happen. Why are kids suffering in Africa? Why there are people dying in the floods? Why is this happening? We start to understand that this is all part, not of a plan, but this is the process itself. See, life in itself, it's not to achieve a goal. There's no goal at the end. It's just to go through. The purpose of life, of this experimentation, is the process itself, is to experience everything there is to experience. And masters that have walked on this earth before knew this. They knew this, and this is why they became masters. I'm not talking about religious masters only, because that's going to trigger a lot of people. I'm not talking about people like Jesus, like Muhammad, like Judah, like Buddha, like Gandhi. I'm not talking about these spiritual masters only who have delivered a specific message. I'm talking about masters who have achieved science, changes in science that have changed all our lives. I'm talking about Einstein and Newton, and I'm talking about social people who have helped society transcend, like Martin Luther King and like Gandhi. And I'm talking about people who have, achieved mastery when, let's say, with communication and technology, and that help us. And this is possible. Me doing this right now, talking to people I have never met in my life through a device, through this. See, these people who have helped shape the world, whether it was religiously, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, any aspect of these people who have made a mark on history, this is who I would call masters, because these people have expressed and experimented with the words, and then once they sat down with themselves within the third pillar and they did the integration, they were able to pass it on to someone else, a whole different life message, a whole different experience in itself. And notice how these people, and this is how this can affect you on a personal level, and this is how I try to do it. I am nowhere near being a master, and I have a long way. But if I put that as my goal, if I put that as my, and if every one of us try to achieve that mastery, that sainthood, as it's called in Christianity, that mastery or transcendence that is called in different religions. Once we reach that, or we at least aim for that, we are no longer bound by this reality which is we created for ourselves, in which we blame things around us because we think that bad things are not supposed to happen, because we think that bad things are punishments and are karma in a way that is coming back to us, and it's because we were bad, it's gonna hurt us and we're gonna suffer from what we did. It's not about that. See, everything that happens is a consequence of something else. This is the law of causality, of whatever has an action has an equal reaction. That's it. There is nothing else. It's not God punishing us for what we did. It's not karma coming back to us to hurt us because of what we did. It's the consequences of our actions. Everything that is happening in the world, and yes, including the natural disasters, including the wars, including the famine and the poverty and people killing each other. This is, if people have simply just sit down and decide not to kill each other anymore, they will not kill each other anymore. That's it. This is a consciousness process that we are going through, all of us, to understand that we have to go above this. And going back to the masters, one thing that they all have in common, in whatever field they were in whatever aspect they brought us their masterhood, was that they never victimized themselves. They never sat down and said, I am a victim of my consequences and I'm not going to do anything about it. These people have gone through so much bad things, so that I don't say another word, that instead of them sitting and playing the victim and blaming others and the world and the collective over their own experience, they actually understood that whatever happened to them, even if they felt bad about it. See, it's not about losing that emotion. It's not about not feeling bad. If someone I know dies, of course I'm going to feel bad, but this is part of it. It's not about, see, we don't have a control over what happens. We have control over how we receive the things that happened. And yes, we can sit down and feel bad and cry and hate things and blame things. But then at some point, once that goes over, we have to act upon it. And this is what these masters did. How many of these religious people who have gone through so much have actually been tortured for what they did? Some have died, have been killed, have been crucified, have been they lost everything because of what they did. How much have these masters of social justice have suffered? Martin Luther King was killed. Gandhi was killed. Malcolm X. Everyone who has ever... Nelson Mandela has gone to prison for 20 years because of his ideas and what he did. When you talk about people like Saint Teresa, for example, she's been through the lowest of the low with people who have known what it's like to suffer and to feel pain and agony. And it's not like it was nice for her to go through this. It's not like she went home and like she was happy because she was rich or has money or whatever. But because she understood that whatever process she's going through, it's all serving a higher purpose. It's all understanding that we are here to experiment and to absorb everything the world has to give us, and then to give back to others. This is what masterhood is. It's not being shackled down by the world that has been put around us. Some are born into poverty. Some are born into richness. Some are born into peaceful places. Others are born into wars. Yes, it's good and it's bad because we call it good and bad, because we have put labels on certain emotions that we think we shouldn't go through. But masters, they have understood that everything that has come from this earth and everything that we have done to each other as human beings and everything that we will do into the future and what we've done in the past and what we're going through right now, it's all part of a learning process. So instead of us sitting and focusing on, I cannot do this, I don't want to do this, everything around me stops me, I'm being victim, I have been oppressed, I have done this. What instead we must do is achieve, or at least aim to achieve, the third pillar, which is the integration. Aim to achieve this understanding that, okay, I have been through so much in my life. I have been through this and that, and everyone has been through something. You don't sit with a single human being, whether dead or alive, all of the past people who have existed until today, and everyone who is going to exist into the future. There isn't a single person alive who cannot tell you that they have gone through a hardship or something difficult. It doesn't exist. Why? Because it's part of the process, because it's part of the experience and experimentation of this reality that we are in. It's not because God is sitting somewhere deciding that these people must suffer, these people are my people so they will not suffer, and these people are praying so they will not go through something. Do you know anyone who prays and doesn't go through bad stuff? Do you know anyone who doesn't pray and doesn't go through bad stuff? Relationship with God and the way God looks at us, that consciousness that is expressing itself, is not through punishment, and it's not through bad things, because there is no punishment. The punishment that we have labeled it as punishment is what we ourselves think it is. But if we look at it from a different place, from a different perspective, if we understand that this is all part of the learning process, and that we are on our way to grasp everything that this experience has to give us, then we will deal with things a lot differently. And we will be able to achieve what those masters have achieved. And if we don't achieve them now, we will achieve them later. We are not bound by time. There is no hurry in this. There is just a process of experimentation and of integration. And so to end this, the four pillars of reality: expression, the consciousness is expressing itself. It is experimenting with everything that reality has to give. It is integration. We learned, now we put them all together and we pass them on to someone. And transcendence, where we are no longer connected to this reality or this experience, and we are ready for a higher level of consciousness, which is always the goal of everything. So thank you for listening to me. If you are on my YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to comment down. Let me know what you think, and thank you for listening as always.